Step into a world where ancient wisdom meets modern mysticism. Introducing the Gnostic Tarot, a powerful fusion of esoteric art and Gnostic themes designed for those who seek the ultimate Gnosis. This mesmerizing deck, rich in symbolism, draws from the profound teachings of Gnosticism, serving as an ideal companion for meditation, reflection, and the exploration of spiritual realms. Whether you are a seasoned tarot enthusiast or new to the practice, the Gnostic Tarot caters to all, offering a portal to ancient wisdom and a tool for uncovering the hidden truths in your mystical journey. Unveil the mysteries, embrace the wisdom. The Gnostic Tarot is a timeless companion for your spiritual odyssey. Take a journey with Gnostic luminaries and learn their stories in a visually stunning manner. From Sophia to the Gnostic Christ, their journey is your self-discovery. Choose from the basic deck or the deluxe version, which includes a beautifully crafted journey book and a magnetic storage box, ensuring that your Gnostic Tarot remains a treasured companion on your spiritual quest. The Gnostic Tarot is an original and collaborative effort between Miguel Conner of Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio and Matthew Schmitz of Altrusian Grace Media. Visit our website to embark on your journey today. Syncrasis Publishing, where ancient wisdom and modern mysticism converge. Happy heresies, and welcome to the desert of the real. Get thee thy Gnostic Tarot and figure out the code. So good to see everybody today on this Mercury day. My name is Miguel Conner, and I am your Pompatus of Gnosis. I hope you're writing your own gospel and living your own myth, or the demiurge Yaldi will hire some ghostwriters to write your life and perhaps curse you with being average or worse. I hope you're running with those searching for the truth and avoiding those who have found it. I hope you're raging against heaven and storming the gates of hell for your misplaced childhoods and paradises lost. And we do this by Gnosis. So good to see everybody already in the chat. I see Christina Maria. Good to see you. Always good to see you. And I see the Cactus. Good to see you too, and glad you are enjoying this channel, and we are humbled to be of service. So very excited today as we will be discussing Aikido and Theurgy, as Jung called Alexandria, ancient Alexandria. It's that place where East meets West, and that's what we're doing today for you. So to do this, we are very honored to have Jon Di Luca with us. Jon, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Miguel. It's a real honor. Appreciate it. I love it.
Pleasure is all ours. Yeah, and love what you do, and not just the synthesis, but how you bring very useful and helpful ideas to the world, and exercises and history. So we'll definitely start getting into that. And with us too, we got Graham Pong. Graham, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good today. I know a little bit about Theurgy, not a lot about Aikido, and maybe you'll give me some insight into that. Am I supposed to buy the sword? Am I supposed to destroy the sword? Or do I buy the sword just to destroy it? Maybe I get some insights here. Tag.
Yeah, well, we will find that. Yeah, we will certainly find that out too. Yes, and as always, as Graham just said in the chat, if you have any questions for John or complaints against me, or you want to share some insights or support this show, which I always appreciate to keep this Red Pill Cafeteria open, please super chat them, and we will certainly get to you as soon as possible. Not much else in the house keeping place. Again, the occult Elvis is doing well. I was on BBC Radio last week. I will be back on BBC Radio next week, doing a lot of podcasts, writing a lot of articles, finding a lot of new research on Elvis and his occult side, which you can find at the Substack, stuff that's not even in the book. And it's pretty amazing. So the adventure continues with the king, who himself was a big proponent of martial arts. He was one of the innovators, one of the first black belts in the United States in the late 50s, and he continued to promote it. You could say he really set the stage for many of the martial arts exemplars that we love, like Bruce Lee or Chuck Norris or so many of these others. Somebody asked, did Elvis and Bruce Lee ever meet? They didn't, but Elvis knew of his work, loved it, and he always thought that Bruce Lee's passing involved foul play. So, yeah, that's it. Great shows coming. Next week, we will have the amazing Ike Baker to discuss his new book, Etheric Magic. So check that out, and I hope to see everybody there. Well, John, let's get started with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a heretic.
I think I was raised a heretic. My father was always very how do you say, open-minded about everything. I mean, he gave me tarot cards when I was like 12, a Ouija board. He kind of messed me up though. He let me watch The Exorcist when I was 6. That might have been the real catalyst, was watching The Exorcist when I was 6, because then it scared me so bad that I felt like I had to know everything there was to know about demons or demon possession, spirit possession. So I feel like I had to intensely research that so that to alleviate my fear of it, and that led me to recognize that we all have a daimon, we all have a tutelary spirit, and getting to know that tutelary spirit is really, and just in my opinion, like the key to understanding spirituality in general for me. More so than any religious texts or, mythology, understanding your relation to that tutelary spirit is the only really personal link you can have. Mm-hmm. But that's totally different from, well, it's actually not totally different from Aikido, because that's the amazing thing, is that Aikido has a link to shamanic and spirit possession rituals. That's really incredible. Like I just started researching it more in depth this last year, because for the past 10 years I've been obsessed with Neoplatonism, and that led me to researching Theurgy, right? And then so in trying to find modern theurgical practices, at one point I realized I'm already practicing one, because I've been practicing Aikido for almost 25 years now. And through my recent research, I can say that Aikido practice itself is a form of Theurgy, based on the founders' spiritual practices, and kind of Japanese spirituality in general is, they have a less broken link than I think we do in terms of animism and shamanism. So I don't know if I told you about myself. You asked me about myself.
No. These are great. Okay. We will certainly unpack it. We have time to unpack it. Obviously, Theurgy, the old, as they say, demiurge working. Of course, they have a very different view of the demiurge than many of the Gnostics there, but it's the idea of, connecting with the divine. And of course, the daemon is extremely important to Neoplatonism and really many of these off-worlder traditions and Hellenistic thought and all that. That's the part of us that we're supposed to unite with, the part of us that remembers our past lives and is sort of the manager behind the stage and all that. So just real quick, I want to get into how you got into Aikido, but if I had to ask you really quickly, what is the alternative or the parallel of a daemon in Aikido?
Oh, well, they have so in Aikido itself, they don't really talk about this. Like if you go to a dojo, they might not talk about this, but it's just if you research it a little further. In Shinto, is in a specific branch of Shinto that the founder of Aikido was involved in, they have this idea of Ichirei Shinkon. I think it's one spirit, four souls. So they believe you have four souls, and there's one spirit that's given to you that manages the four souls. I should have written down the four souls, what they are, but they basically represent four elements: fire, water, earth, and what's the other element? Fire, water, earth, air. Air. But air is spirit, like, and there's spirit, fire, earth, and water. I mean, I'm not a Shinto scholar, so like I don't want to misrepresent it, but I would say it's called the Naohi. That would, to me, that's the closest approximation in my studies on the spiritual foundations of Aikido. That would be comparable to a daemon or to a genie. I like to call it a genie because it sounds less spooky,
especially for the Judo-Christian world. But don't they have in Shinto the spirits? What are the name of the spirits?
Kami.
The kami. So kami would be separate than your daemon. They're just
yeah. See, I don't. They also. I think the Naohi is the personal daemon, the one that's yours, that is guiding you. The kami, they say there's 8 million kami. They say they're innumerable, and in early Shinto, they weren't even differentiated by names. It was more of just like a locus of power in an area or in a specific, like if you came upon a mountain or a rock or a tree that was really like amazing, or a river, you would say that like there's a lot of kami here. There's an effluence of kami, so, but eventually they did develop a mythology or like a cosmogony of kami with all different names and how they created the universe, and that's called the Kojiki, and that was written in like 712, around 700 AD, and that plays heavy into the Shinto, into the practices, because some scholars believe that the Kojiki is written in what they call Kotodama, which means like the words themselves are a spell if you recite them. So they believe that the original Kojiki was an oral. It's that's similar to like Homer too, right?
Yeah.
They believe original Homeric poems were oral. They were, obviously, and then they wrote them down. So the Kojiki, the original, it's in how you read it, how it's said out loud verbally. It possesses power.
No, yeah, makes sense for sure. And well, we want to again loop back on a few of these ideas, but let's get first of all, how did you find Aikido?
Well, I found Aikido kind of by accident. I mean, I grew up. I'm 49, so I grew up mostly in the 80s, 90s. Steven Seagal movies were pretty popular.
Oh yeah,
and he gets a lot of shit now because he went a little crazy, but like his movies were pretty good, I think.
They were, yeah.
And he was always fighting like the CIA or police. He was kind of he was fighting the real bad guys in some sense. or he was like an environmentalist on a cruise, on a ship, whatever. Like, but anyway, I was living and working in Manhattan, in Chelsea, and I worked at a restaurant as a waiter a few blocks away. So my life was really simple at the time. It was just walk to work. It was like 5 minutes. And on the way, there was an Aikido dojo, which is pretty world famous. And I just kind of stumbled in there. And when I first walked in, like, the energy was crazy. Like, just I was in the middle of class and there was like 30, 40 people practicing. And I was like, wow, what is this? And then, it was Aikido. And I was like, oh, that's the Steven Seagal thing. But it doesn't look like Steven Seagal movies at the dojo. It looks like, I mean, people were throwing each other, like you grab somebody and they throw you, and you do like a, you fall and you land safely. And I had taken judo in high school, because this is a little bit of an embarrassing admission, but when I was a kid, and even now a little bit, I was really into professional wrestling. Like, that was what I wanted to be when I grew up. I think it's because I was really exposed to violence a lot when I was a kid, and I liked fake violence. I liked the fact that they weren't really hurting each other, but they were doing some really cool shit, like cool moves, and like characters were funny, and like, so when I first found Aikido, I was drawn to it by that, in a way that it was almost like you're just learning how to throw people safely, and you're learning how to diffuse an attack. Like, someone tries to punch you, someone tries to grab you, someone tries to stab you, you're learning to diffuse the attack without hurting the person, right? So it doesn't really channel up such violence within you. It's like soothing in a way, right? And that, when I first started, that's what I got from it. But then I went to the bookstore and found a few books on Aikido, and then it has this like really interesting spiritual cosmic dimension that I wasn't ready to delve into at the time, but that I've been delving into more now. But once I started, I was hooked, and I never stopped. It's the one thing I've never quit. I've been like acting, singing. I've done like a bunch of shit that I quit. But Aikido, it's addictive physically. Like, it's fun. I even lived at a dojo for a year once. That dojo that I started at, I ended up living there for a year, practicing like 5 hours a day.
Very cool. Very cool. So awesome. Yeah. Well, why don't we get into the history of Aikido? Tell us about that, how this tradition came about.
All right. I'm going to give you a choice, though. Would you rather hear about the founder and then get into the more broad historical stuff? Or do you want like linearly from the historical up to the founder? Because
that's a good question.
It taps into some like early spiritual principles that he ended up following, that he came upon within his own life. So it's...
Well, let me, Graham, what do you think? Would you pick door number 1 or door number 2, Graham?
Wow, I can't go with what's behind the curtain. Damn, Monty. Okay.
You don't want to know what's behind the curtain.
Let's go with the founder. It's always good to sit and get the original thoughts and then watch how it grows over time.
That's true. The hero's journey.
Okay. So the founder of Aikido, Aikido practitioners call him O-Sensei, which just means great teacher. His name is Morihei Ueshiba, but I'll just call him O-Sensei for the sake of, convenience for the telling of his life. So he was born into like a farming family, right? But he was born in an area of Japan called Kumano. It's Kumano Mountains, right? And the mountains themselves are famous for being an area with really heavy Shingon Buddhism influence. Shingon Buddhism is tantric Buddhism, it's an esoteric Buddhism that has a direct lineage to Vajrayana, which is Tibetan Buddhism. And they have practices that I would also call theurgical, where you're chanting and bringing yourself into communion with the divine. So O-Sensei grew up in that area, and as a young child he was drawn to studying in the temples with the priests and learning the stories of the founder of Shingon Buddhism. He was like a hero in the area. People said that his ghost would, like, talk to young children, or and there was also in Japan, there's this other religion called Shugendo, which is basically a mountain, like a mountain mystic religion, where people go into the mountains and they fast and they sit in caves, and they claim that they learn martial arts by these demon. Oh, in Japan there's these demons called Tengu, which they live in the mountains, and they're kind of related to this religion Shugendo, and they teach martial arts, right? So he grew up in this milieu, in this area, so he was surrounded by these spiritual practices. And supposedly his mother wanted him to be a priest because he showed so much interest in these type of things. But his father wanted him to be more of like a manly man, so he got him into like sumo wrestling. Back then, I think a lot of young people did sumo. Like that was their exercise. They would just go practice sumo. It wasn't as specialized as it is now, with just like big, really fat guys, big giant guys. It was so he grew up in a really crazy period of time in Japan, early 1900s. He was born in 1888, right? And so he grew up in the early 1900s in Japan, and they were at war with Russia. There was the Russo-Japanese War. And so he ended up going into the military and becoming a bayonet fighter trainer. He would train soldiers to fight with the bayonet, right? And then he was offered a post in the military, like a career, but he turned it down, and basically didn't know what to do with his life for a while. He tried running a stationery store, but the business failed, and he went back home and had a nervous breakdown, kind of. And he went up into the mountains and fasted and tried to find like spiritual answers to his life. And his father built him a judo dojo, and he was like practicing judo and just practicing these spiritual practices in the mountains, trying to find answers. And then, so in Japan, there's, the north of Japan is Hokkaido. Hokkaido? That's the northern island of Japan is called Hokkaido, and it's cold up there. It's northern lands, right? And it was still pretty wild back then. So the government was offering people land if they would go up and settle it. So O-Sensei took a group of people from his area and went up to Hokkaido to do like homesteading, to like cultivate the land for farming. And so he did that for 10 years maybe. Okay. Now, this is where the story gets crazy. So he's up there in Hokkaido doing homesteading, right? And he meets a really mysterious martial arts figure in Japanese history called Sokaku Takeda, right? And Sokaku Takeda was teaching a martial art called Daito Ryu Jiu-Jitsu. It's a form of jiu-jitsu that he said was in his family for 1,000 years, right? And supposedly, it's a little bit dark, but supposedly the start of this family jiu-jitsu was a child during a really war-torn period. And as a child, he would go onto the battlefield and like find skeletons, find corpses and dead bodies, and analyze the skeletons, how they moved, and how the joints were all locked together. And he developed a jujitsu based on the skeleton, like how the mechanics of a skeleton.
Very cool.
And if you ever practice Aikido, you can see that that basically is the skeleton of Aikido. You're learning how the joints lock into each other and affect the balance of the other person, right? So he studies with this guy Sokaku Takeda for years, and he becomes one of his teachers. He becomes a licensed teacher of this jujitsu, right? And he becomes anyway. He's teaching this jujitsu style, and then his father gets sick, right? So now he's up in Hokkaido, and his homeland is like kind of south. So it takes 10 days to get back to his hometown where his father is deathly ill.
Right.
And on the way there on the train, he hears someone talking about a miracle worker, right? A guy who can work miracles in this town called Ayabe, which is on the way home. So he stops off in this town called Ayabe to pray. He goes, and what he doesn't realize is that this town Ayabe is the headquarters of a new religion that started in Japan called Omoto.
Mm-hmm.
And the founder, not the founder, but the leader of Omoto at this time is named Onesaburo Deguchi. And I'll just call him Deguchi for simplicity, right? Deguchi. Now, Deguchi is a fascinating character. We could get into him more if you want, but for now, so O-Sensei goes to pray. And this whole town is dedicated to this religion called Omoto, right? So he goes to pray in the main temple, and he meets Deguchi, and Deguchi basically just looks at him and tells him, "Don't worry about your father. That's his natural course. You know, there's nothing you could do for him, right? So let's just pray for him." So they pray, and then O-Sensei ends up staying there for 3 days with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it gets crazy. What they do is this practice called Chinkon Kishin, right? Chinkon Kishin can be traced back to the earliest Japanese shamanic practices. And what you're doing, it literally means you're calming your soul, you're calming your spirit in order to interact with the divine. You call the gods, you're interacting with the divine. And this practice became so popular from like 1915 to 1920 that this religion Omoto Deguchi was using this practice to basically, so it's a guided spirit possession, right? You sit down and you meditate, you do these special breathing practices,
Right.
and they had a stone flute they would play, and then they would do these specific chants, and then not everyone would get possessed, but if there was like signs of possession, and if someone was exhibiting signs of possession, they had a special person that they were training to like interview the spirits and find out which spirit it was, find out what it wanted. Like, and this religion got so popular, it had like 5 million adherents at a certain point, right? So O-Sensei gets involved with this religion and becomes Deguchi's bodyguard.
Mm.
He goes home, his father's already dead, right? And he has like a little bit of a breakdown about that. And then he just packs his family up and goes and lives with this guy, Deguchi. And he becomes a national martial arts like star, like because Deguchi is like, Deguchi needs more recognition in the West somehow. I don't know if I'm the person to do it, but he was like, I mean, think about having like a 5 million people in your religion at a time, and what he was about was like listening to the gods, right? like bringing humanity back into harmony with the gods. And it was an agrarian utopian religion, right? They were saying like we need to live with nature, right? We need to live within our means as like creatures of God kind of thing. But he was also really good at like manipulating media and stuff, and he got involved in really crazy political shit because there was a lot of political shit going on in Japan at the time. You know, it was in between World War I and World War II.
Right.
And the Japanese people had like a really tough decision to make, like between two different branches of fascism, and then like there was really no choice of what to do, you know. So anyway, so O-Sensei studies with O-Sensei becomes the bodyguard and martial arts instructor for this religion called Omoto. And they even go to Manchuria because Japan controlled Manchuria for years during this time. And they went to Manchuria to establish like a colony, like a utopian colony. But they got caught up in the intrigue between the Mongolians and the Chinese, and they almost got executed. They were, it was like a Dostoevsky type thing, you know, where they're basically standing in front of the firing squad. And at the last second, they were pardoned.
Wow.
So he has one of these experiences in his life, you know, of almost dying. So then Omoto gets squashed by the Japanese government twice because they're getting too popular and because the message is too peaceful, maybe, you know, like they were trying to drum up support for military, and Deguchi was not with it. You know, he was preaching peace and harmony with the gods. He was a bit of a narcissist, maybe, like he wanted to be considered a god, but his message was peaceful. So, but then once Omoto gets kind of squashed, O-Sensei ends up having to, because he's such a famous martial artist, he ends up having to train the military for a while, right? But he drops out of that and gets disgusted with Japan's military practices and retreats to a more rural area and opens up his own little dojo and shrine and just dedicates himself to like spiritual practices, and concluding that Aikido itself, the martial art he developed through this other martial art, Daito Ryu, which I said was like skeletal manipulation, and you know, he develops Aikido further into a practice that's promoting harmony as opposed to conflict.
That's a great, thanks for that wonderful journey in history. And yeah, very intriguing as all these stories are. So much going on behind the scenes. Graham, let me bring you in. Do you have a question or remark about this?
No, it's very interesting how it developed without a lot of the more overtly spiritual aspects. And what pops out to me is any sort of connection to like Zen, which, you know, the Zen Buddhism, which is so popular in Japan as well.
Yeah, actually, they say that O-Sensei was not into Zen. He was practicing more of the esoteric Buddhism called Shingon.
It almost seems like it's more of a physicality of it, as opposed to Zen. It's much more of a abstracted mental.
Right. It's an active participation, right? Like that's Aikido is supposed to be an action that you undertake, right? You're undertaking actions in the world.
Okay, so where does that then connect with the theurgy? Where does the magic come out of the actions?
Okay, I think it could connect to theurgy in two ways, because so I was lucky enough to interview Dr. Greg Shaw on my podcast.
Oh, he's wonderful. Yeah, when it comes to theurgy, he's the
Yeah, I know.
main guy in the world. Yes.
And in terms of what I take away from theurgy is what this is just my take. So, but that you're trying to embody, meaning like bring into your body, like a greater spirit, right? So it's how you do that, what you're doing as the action that does that. You know what? So O-Sensei believed that O-Sensei literally believed that a god, that certain gods within the Shinto pantheon delivered Aikido to him. Like it was given to him by gods. Like that's so, to me, that's as theurgical as it gets. Like the gods gave you a practice to do, right? It's from that sense, it's fascinating that the gods like tell you what to do. And Aikido was delivered by the gods as a practice, right? That's how I understand it. That's the connection to theurgy for me.
Interesting. No, that seems very similar to what jumped in my mind as you were talking was like the dervishes, and they're embodying it through the dance, and it seems like a different physicality, but same sort of concept.
Right.
And I'll tag out at this point.
That's kind of what it feels like in a way, because there are a lot of circular movement. I'm not that I've ever done whirling dervish dances, but just there's a lot of circular movement in Aikido, and you do like spin a lot sometimes. So there is a sense of that. And I think Gurdjieff had some, I forgot what they called them, the movements or something. You know about Gurdjieff, right?
I know about that. I forgot the name.
The fourth way, they used to have these movements or exercises that they would do. And I feel like at its crux, Aikido is that. And it like beyond just being like self-defense or martial arts, that's a whole nother argument, whether it's effective, like all that stuff. But just the practice of it puts you in sort of a flow state, right? Just from moving circularly and just from moving in all these shapes. There's shapes to it. And the founder was into that too. There's like a triangle, a square, and a circle, and that it's a little bit above my head, but there's elements of sacred geometry in it, definitely.
Very fascinating. Cool. A lot like dance.
Yeah,
lose yourself in the music and in the motion.
Yeah, I got into tango for a few years once. Like I was going to tango like almost every day, almost every night. I got obsessed with it. And there's a correlation there too, because you have to be connected to your partner, right? Okay, so I'll explain it a little bit, how we practice in Aikido. But there's two forces, right? There's what we call uke, who's the attacker, and nage, who's the defender, right? And there's like a prescribed attack. Like you have attack. You say, so let's just say like punch. We'll do like a punch to the face, right? Just to make it really brutal and easy. And then the defender has a prescribed defense to that. And we practice it, right? And in the beginning, it's kind of clumsy and whatever. But as time goes by, you get more into the role of attacker defender. And there's like a dynamic energy that's built from it. Like that's what we're going for. We're not necessarily going for the excellence of one side over the other, right? The excellence is in the connection between the two sides. And there's definitely a feeling you get from participating in that connection that's similar to something like tango, where you're connected to your partner and you're moving through time and space in a connected way. You definitely get that from Aikido. It's a connection.
Yeah, I think Graham and I, the closest we get to tango is watching that one of history's worst movies, Tango and Cash from the 80s, if anybody remembers that.
I thought you were going to say that Robert Duvall movie, Assassination Tango. Did you ever see that?
No, that one, no, that's better than Tango and Cash, that's for sure. So,
Yeah, I was sort of thinking I can think up some other reasons for tango versus I would for Aikido. So
Yeah, you don't have to fall. One.
mm-hmm.
Unless you really have a partner worth falling with, yep.
and you don't have to wear shoes. When I danced tango, that was the hardest part, was wearing like dress shoes, because they want you to like, you have to wear. There's like, that's part of the uniform.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Now in Theurgy, as you were talking, yeah, it's the idea of connecting with the gods, or bringing down the gods, or putting them in statues, all that. Again, demiurge work. But there's also the idea of two other ideas, is of course purification, and yeah, Greg Shaw talks about the alchema, this astral body you put on that helps you then fly. You know, these people in Alexandria, whether it was the Gnostics, Neoplatonists, or others, were into flying out into space. Is there anything like that in Aikido? Any astral travel, or there's certainly purification of the body, but anything like that?
Well, there is, in the overall spiritual milieu that Aikido is from. If you go to an Aikido dojo, you don't do any astral travel, unfortunately.
Unless you can't pay the bill. Oh, I'm out of here.
you just practice Aikido, like you just do like the martial art. But I feel like if you're someone who's into astral travel, I consider myself into astral travel. I practice something that's kind of like half in between astral travel and just taking a nap, like. But I think so, through practicing Aikido, you are purifying yourself. You are like opening yourself up more, like preparing yourself more for those type of experiences. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what the founder said too. That was what he was doing through his martial arts practice. He was doing it in Japan, they have this concept called misogi, misogi, and that's ritual purification. Now, they're pretty hardcore about it. They go to icy cold waterfalls at like 4 o'clock in the morning. That's what they do, right? And martial arts and fasting and going into caves. They have a pretty intense. So Shinto, like most of what you read about Shinto is about purification rituals. Like that's what they feel like they're doing, is purifying themselves to be more like the gods, to be more in tune with the gods. So O-Sensei developed Aikido as another misogi ritual. So you're purifying your body by practicing, and that would make you more like an antenna, or a conduit. You are more in the spiritual realm because you're purifying your body through the physical practice.
Makes sense. Makes a sense. And I also like the one, what are you talking about? Chinkon Kishin, guided possession. That one looks pretty metal. Tell us about that.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah. That goes back to early, probably honestly goes back to, there's some scholars that trace Japanese shamanism to Mongolia, to the same place, to the same origin, Siberia, Mongolia, to the same origins of Western shamanism. To they say the Greeks. Some people say the Greeks were influenced by the northern shaman too, right?
Yeah, I think Peter Kingsley's idea.
Peter Kingsley, right? Yeah. So, but okay, so let's go to the mid 1800s, around like 1850. There was this scholar named Chikaatsu Honda. I'll just call him Honda for now. So Honda was a Shinto scholar. So he was studying the ancient texts of Shinto, which there's one called the Kojiki. I don't know if I mentioned it already. Kojiki. It was written in 712. It's the oldest Japanese book. Oh yeah, I mentioned it earlier. It's the Shinto cosmogony. It talks of how the gods were born, how the gods created the land, and then how the gods' stories led to the first Japanese people and the emperor and all that shit. So Honda was a Shinto scholar, but he was also studying to be a doctor, I think. His father was a doctor, but they were of a samurai class. And he was studying ancient Japanese religion, but he felt that there wasn't anyone actually practicing the ancient rituals anymore. So he was trying to research that, and he heard of a girl, a 14-year-old girl who was possessed by a fox spirit, who was writing poetry that no 14-year-old girl could write. So he went to see her, and he didn't believe it. Like he was going there to disprove it, or to find out, he was skeptical about it. But when he went there and saw this girl, and he challenged her, well, he was talking to the fox spirit. He challenged the fox spirit to write a poem on the spot about something, and Japanese poetry is very technical and specific, right? So he challenged this 14-year-old girl to write a poem on the spot that there's no way she should be able to write. And she wrote it beautifully, and he said, and perfectly. So he left that convinced that the spirit possession was real. And for the next few years, he in addition to studying the theological aspects of Japanese religion, he traveled throughout the countryside, in the mountains and caves, meeting with people who were possessed by spirits, right? So then he started this thing he called spirit studies. And through his spirit studies, he came up with a practice called Chinkon Kishin. And it comes from two different roots. Chinkon is something goes way back in Shinto, and it means calming your soul, and it has these like coordinated breath and movement exercises and chanting and sounds, and it's just supposed to like bring a spirit back into your body. And Kishin, he said, was spirit possession, where you encounter genuine spirits, and you deal with them, you talk to them, or you interview them, or whatever, right? So
bring them on your podcast, right?
Yeah, right. So that's where Chinkon Kishin comes from, is this guy named Chikaatsu Honda. And he had a disciple. I don't know if I should call him a disciple, but he had his name is Nagasawa, right? And so he trained him in Chinkon Kishin, and Nagasawa had like a school at a shrine where he would teach it, right? And this brings us back to this guy Deguchi I was talking about earlier, who founded the Omoto religion, right? So Deguchi grew up in a poor farming family, and his childhood was rough. His father died when he was 16, but he was always considered gifted in poetry and literature and spiritual. Like he was studying, even though he was really poor and had no way to actually study for real. He was always interested in that stuff. And his father died when he was 16, and he became a drinker. Like he just was running with the wrong crowd, drinking a lot, making a lot of enemies. And one day he got beat almost to death by these people he owed money to, or people, something like that. And he ended up going up into the mountains in a cave and fasting, and it was like freezing, and he just did this like 7-day fast in a cave. And he said he was visited by spirits, or he was brought to the spirit world and shown the reality of the spirit world, right? And one of the spirits that supposedly he came into contact with was this guy named Honda that I was talking about earlier, that came up with Chinkon Kishin, right? So Deguchi goes and studies with Nagasawa, who was Honda's student, and learns Chinkon Kishin, right? Now, then Deguchi ends up going to the town called Ayabe, which I talked about earlier, which is where O-Sensei met him. And he meets this old woman who's starting a local cult because she was possessed by a spirit that's giving her prophetic messages. And the old woman sees him and says that he was sent, he was the one that was prophesized or whatever. And he marries her daughter, and he joins this religion and becomes like the leader. And through Chinkon Kishin, he grows this religion. It's like to upwards of millions of people within like a 10-year period.
Wow.
So the practice is like I said before, that they sit you down and they play a stone flute and they chant, and a spirit is supposed to come into your body. And there's historical accounts of it. I mean, it got wild. They used to do it in banquet halls with like dozens of people at once. And there would be riots. Can you imagine that? Like doing like a group spirit possession in a banquet hall?
Yeah. Talk about entertainment. The main act. Yeah, and of course this harkens to the idea of Plato and the divine possession, whether it's your muse or Apollo or Dionysus or your daemon. Yeah, something bigger has to take over you. So that's definitely, the source must be some sort of shamanistic primordial religion.
And Socrates.
Yeah.
Socrates is so interesting, man. Like Socrates turned the whole concept of the demon like on its head, right? Socrates was like, my demon's good.
Yeah, you can tell him the weather. Simple. It was like his iPhone. Yeah, fascinating. Any questions from you, Graham, as we get to the top of the hour, or what do you think so far, sir?
No, I think it's a fascinating take. Not something I had considered before. I can definitely see the connection he's making. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I'm glad I was coherent. I was worried like I was.
No. You definitely did it. So Aikido, to embrace it, there's again, like you said, you go to the dojo, you do the exercises. Is there a spiritual part that you do on the side, or is it all in the dojo? Because I'm sure meditation, when I used to do Kempo karate, we still had to do 10 minutes of meditation at the end of class. It was just part of it's what you did, right?
Yeah, well, before class we do. So to take it a little further, the Chinkon Kishin. So the Chinkon Kishin we were talking about earlier, the spiritual possession, that got stopped in like the mid-20s. The Omoto stopped doing it because it was getting too dangerous. But O-Sensei continued doing his own form that was less about the possession and more about just bringing your soul into just merging your soul with the divine, right? So we have, before class, not every teacher does it. Some teachers stop doing it, but there's a form of Chinkon we do before class, which is breathing exercises, some vocalizations, so that's definitely part of it. But I think it's up to the individual who practices Aikido to delve further into the cosmology that created it. At the dojo, it's more just something we want people to enjoy doing, and there's people with different religious backgrounds or whatever, so you don't want to start talking to them about demons. Well, they might.
You'll be possessed.
For me, but yeah, I've always just personally been interested in like what I call like mystic mystic philosophy or literature or whatever. Like I've always been interested in that in myself. So, but it's not prescribed to someone practicing Aikido that they have to understand Chinkon Kishin, or they don't have to know that the founder of Aikido was like in touch with a god named Sarahito Okami, you know.
And who is this god? What was it?
Sarahito Okami?
Mm-hmm.
No, Saruta Hito Okami. He's said to occupy this floating bridge between heaven and earth. He's the guardian of the space between earth and heaven. And so according to the founder's words, he was told by him to, you know, develop Aikido, or that he was given him the mission of Aikido, kind of.
Wow, so this deity was like the Lord of the Crossroads, or
Yeah, he is. That's what they
liminal.
say. They say the Crossroads. Yeah.
So he's
They
like,
say,
Hermes, or the devil in
right.
blues, or a Krishna in some Indian traditions. Hecate, all those. Yeah. One of my favorite sort of archetypal images or gods, because that's where the magic happens. That's where you find yourself or destroy yourself. So
yeah.
Or
Well,
learn
that's where
the blues.
right. I think it's good for people who find themselves at the crossroads, you know, to have deities to deal to. I don't think everyone understands that part of life, you know. That dark, like the darkness, the dark, because there's darkness in O-Sensei's life too, you know, like Japan during World War II.
Yeah.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine living in Japan during, like, in between the first and second World War?
No. Crazy place becoming an empire, the genocide, Japan being turned into an agrarian wasteland by the Americans and the Russians. We forget the Soviets also invaded Japan while the Americans were bombing the hell out of it. Yeah. It's.
I mean, and they have a long history of like just being an island into themselves, and like, you know, for that whole history to just kind of come crumbling down, you know.
Having to reboot, which they had to do, that's for sure. Yeah, it definitely is something else. I do see a super chat here. Thank you very much, Christina, for your support. And here's your question. Let me see if you can. What do you think, John? Christina's asking, interesting talk. Any beginner tips on starting with theurgy? Can you tie it to any other physical or even artistic practice?
Well, I would say that every artistic practice is theurgical, right? I mean, you're channeling a divine helper in your artistic pursuits. I think, unfortunately, I feel like most of the way you can interact with theurgy is just by reading about it, and then, you know, because there really is no. It's such an interesting concept that I feel got lost in history through the predominant Abrahamic religions, you know, like the supremacy of the Abrahamic religions, and then the only choice being Eastern religions. Like, you know, you could either be like Christian, Jewish, or Buddhist or something. Like, I feel like, and there's the pagan things just get like swept up all into the same bin as being like evil, so people are scared of them, you know. But theurgy, there's some great books, right? Like you've had PD Newman on?
Yes, his book on theurgy. Yes,
theurgy, yeah. But I would just say that anything that you do that you feel like brings you closer to divinity is theurgical, because the gods are in everything, right? Like, I mean, I don't think there's any place where there's not gods.
Yeah, for sure. Christina, I would also suggest Jeffrey Kupperman's Living Theurgy book. I think it's edited by Sorita Deste. So that one's good because he actually provides prayers and some of the rituals and so forth if you want to sort of adopt it. Obviously parallels. Yeah, in those days you'd have Gnostic, anything Gnostic, Hermeticist, or Kabbalistic is some form of theurgy, you know. I mean, and the Neoplatonists used the term Gnosis. They had no problem with it. So yeah. So John is right.
And join an Aikido dojo near you.
Yeah, everybody's Aikido fighting.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Good I mean, deal. Where else in life do you get to have like sword fights? You know, like, so this is like my thesis in a way, is that it was given to O-Sensei by the gods, right? For those of us living during this time, like myself, who just get super depressed from having to be attached to a screen all day, right? And having to just be a completely mental creature, right? There's very few things that put you in touch with your body, right? Like, unless you're a farmer or, you know, you're a construction worker or something, like where you're using your body and you're feeling alive, right? Aikido is a great practice for that, predominantly because you don't have to hurt anybody doing it, right? You can exert like really powerful movements with your body, like putting all your energy into a movement, like a sword cut, like you could cut somebody with a sword, but without actually hurting anybody, right? And really, the sword fighting part is a lot of fun. Just like it is. Like I said, in life, you don't really get to practice swords fighting, and we do in Aikido, and it's fun. So I mean,
good deal, awesome. Well, as we get towards the end, tell us where do you want to send people? Tell about your Substack, right? That's where you've got your podcast and your articles.
Right. So on Substack, it's Key to the City, Ki to the City. You could also find it just by my name, Jon Di Luca. And so I write. My writing is a little weird. Like, I write prose poetry. I never like really learned how to write articles or essays. I dropped out of community college and I wanted to be like a famous singer. So I was like writing songs. So I learned how to write poetry and prose poetry. So my writing's a little weird, but I also have interviews with people, not just in the Aikido world, but, you know, all kinds of interesting conversations. And you could also just find me on Facebook. I'm still on Facebook. I never really figured out how to make a dent on Twitter or anything like that. So Facebook, just my name, Jon Di Luca. If you have any questions about Aikido or practicing or anything, you could just follow me there. But the Substack is a good place. Please.
Yeah, check it out. I know I'm subbed there, and yes, it's on the show notes, whether you're watching this on YouTube or any of the other, or Rumble, or if you're listening on the podcast provider of your choice. When it comes out on audio, it's on the show notes. Check it out, click it, and find out more. These are fascinating. It's wonderful to see how diverse these traditions are in the East, even in Japan. Most people always think, well, there's only Zen or Shinto, but there is a rich array of religions and traditions, and something there for you, and something valuable to learn. So we are at the end. First, I'd like to say, Graham, thanks for keeping us company.
Oh, as always, it's been my pleasure. And thank you for the great education, John.
Oh, yes, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yes, John, we really appreciate you being here. And yeah, good luck with your work, and good luck with your finding your daemon. Continue finding your daemon. So.
And if anyone out there is in New York, just, you know, come visit me at the dojo.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds like a plan. It could be eye-opening and life-changing. And for people in the chat, thanks for being here. I saw some great quotes. For some reason, people were talking about Back to the Future 4. I don't think they're whatever, but you never know what's in the air. I don't know. But yeah, great comics and so forth. And yeah, please support Aeon Byte in any way you can. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your senseis, tell everybody. And Let's keep the heresy going and the lights of the pleroma on. But that we are at the end of this adventure. So everybody, however you're listening, thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self here in the desert of the real. Take care, everybody.